Cet épisode de Questions de preuve est présenté par la 9e édition du défi 28 jours sans alcool de la Fondation Jean Lapointe, présenté par Triani. Et qui de mieux pour venir en parler que mon amie Catherine Desèves, actrice marquante du paysage télévisuel et artistique québécois, narratrice, annonceur, productrice et surtout ambassadrice du défi 28 jours sans alcool de la Fondation Jean Lapointe. Salut Catherine.
Bonjour Hugo, merci beaucoup de m'inviter sur ton podcast.
Ben écoute, merci beaucoup de partager ton expérience et ce que la Fondation Jean Lapointe fait. Justement, je parlais, là, c'est la 9e édition du défi 28 jours sans alcool. Parle-nous un petit peu de ça.
Le défi 28 jours sans alcool, c'est un moment où on prend une pause en tant que Québécois et Québécoises sur notre consommation d'alcool. Et ça, c'est dans le but de prévenir la dépendance chez les jeunes en milieu scolaire. C'est une bonne occasion pour les gens de se questionner un peu sur leur rapport à l'alcool. Si je peux faire une petite parenthèse, moi-même, je l'ai fait il y a 2 ans. J'ai trouvé ça très dur, les 24 premières journées. Mais après, les 4 dernières journées, je me suis sentie un peu libérée. Puis figure-toi donc que je n'ai plus rebu une seule goutte d'alcool depuis. Donc, le but ultime, c'est de ramasser 1 500 000 $, rien de moins, pour la Fondation. Et cet argent va aller directement dans les ateliers pour les jeunes, dans les écoles. La Fondation Jean Lapointe offre des ateliers de sensibilisation au sujet de la consommation des drogues, de l'alcool et maintenant de la cyberdépendance.
Rendez-vous sur les réseaux sociaux pour joindre le mouvement et appuyer sur pause pour la cause. Facebook, Instagram, Défi 28 jours ou Fondation Jean Lapointe. Et n'hésitez pas à vous présenter directement sur le site défi28jours.com pour participer ou parrainer Catherine Desèves.
Merci Hugo, merci tout le monde.
Question de preuve, an app to automate the police complaint process. From the Léo Laporte studio, I'm Hugo Martin, a private practice lawyer since 1997 and the founder of Rivercast Media, a podcast production company. I am the host of Question de preuve, or its English translation, Question of Proof, or is it Question of Evidence? You get the point and the pun. A podcast about law and justice by and for lawyers, attorneys, and notaries whose objectives are to advance the practice of law and promote access to justice. Some of our podcasts are eligible for the continuing legal education required by the Quebec Bar Association and therefore accredited by most bar associations. There's some kind of an agreement between the professional orders, I was told. You can visit rivercastmedia.com for additional details. I am joined today by Sarah Gabad, research assistant for Question de Preuve podcast here on the network. Hello, Sarah.
Hello, Hugo.
Thank you for joining us for the first time. All right, great, welcome. As raised by the Black Lives Matter movement, BLM, rights and freedoms under the Charter can be in confrontation with police powers and duties. From this movement, one of many things came up. People want to feel and be heard by the police authorities. With this problematic in mind, 4 law students from the University of Alberta recently competed and won an international legal tech competition by creating an app that automates the police complaint process. As for the international tech competition is the Iron Tech Lawyer Invitational, and it's from the Georgetown Law faculty. Our guest will tell us a little bit more about this as well. This app uses an open source legal automation tool called DocAssemble, and it uses a guided interview technique to lead the user step by step with each question to determine whether there's legal grounds for a complaint. If there are grounds, it generates a formal complaint letter that cites the relevant statutes for each ground and sends it anonymously if requested to the police chief, the police commission, and the Department of Professional Standards for the Police Services and the Provincial Minister of Justice. This app is a prime example of how technology can increase access to justice, which is one of the goals of this podcast. So when I read about this app on the net and the international competition, I reached out to the 4 brilliant law students from the University of Alberta, that is Denis, Prabhjot Punnia, Darren, Wagner, and Karyna Omelchenko. Sarah was instrumental in getting one of them here today on this episode to talk to us about their guided interview for Police Complaints app. Denis Ram is our guest today. He's the project manager. He just graduated from the University of Alberta, where he was recently awarded the Justice Cecilia Johnstone Equality Award by the Dean for his lifelong volunteer work. Denis, welcome. I know it was a long introduction, but I wanted to give a little bit of the gist about what we're going to talk about today, which is a little bit outside the scope of my regular episode. So welcome, Denis. Thank you for being with us today, all the way from Alberta.
Thanks for having me. I'm very excited to be here today.
Great. You were supposed to be with Prabhjot today, but she is, luckily or not, I'm not exactly sure. She's on a flight or the flight was delayed. So unfortunately, she cannot be with us today, but you were the project manager. Am I correct?
That is correct.
So tell us a little bit how this entire project came to life. So I guess it started by the Iron Tech Invitational, or is it you decided to start the app and then you got into the competition?
Yeah, so the app actually started off from a course we took in law school called Coding the Law. So in that class, we have law students, most of which don't have a background in computer science. We spend the first half of the semester learning how to use different automation tools. And then in the second half of the semester, we actually create an app for a not-for-profit or a government entity or something or another like that. And specifically with regard to increasing access to justice. So our team, myself, Prabhjot, Karyna, and Darren, we were kind of deciding what kind of app should we make. And actually last summer, in the wake of George Floyd's murder, the city of Calgary held a 3-day anti-racism town hall where, after those 3 days, you just heard time after time, unreported police complaint after unreported police complaint. So our team decided to take a look at that and just kind of determine what was it about the police complaint process that we see this gap in accessing justice. And that's what led us to specifically building our app. The big point of our app is just kind of to get those increased numbers of respondents when it comes to complaints. And because right now what we see, if you do want to file a formal complaint, it's a bit of a mishmash between, City of Calgary website, the police commission, the police service. And then when you do try to file a formal complaint, it's more or less just a big text box where the respondent has to guess what may or may not be relevant. There's no check-ins and you're not even sure what's going to happen with that. With our app instead, it just uses plain language questions and it leads you through a very user-friendly interface with a focus on minimizing re-traumatization. And, after clicking through, you check off the boxes that may or may not apply to you. And then from there, the app is actually able to put together a letter that looks like it was written by a lawyer. And, as you said earlier, it goes down to actually citing the statute, 51A or 51G of the Alberta police regulations as, grounds that may have been breached. So once we kind of decided what we wanted to do with our app, we actually reached out to one of the city councillors here in Calgary who's been really supportive with the police reform stuff that we've seen going on in Calgary. So we actually originally created the app for his office, which then he presented to the city of Calgary. And then throughout that process, we actually won the U Alberta Access to Justice Technology Competition, which then led us to the International Iron Tech Lawyer Competition. So that's kind of how we got to those steps there.
That's so awesome, Denis. As a recent law graduate, I'm wondering, what was it like winning this international competition?
Yeah, it was unexpected to say the least. Typically it's Stanford or Hong Kong kind of university, Singapore that's usually winning this one. So to not just represent Canada on the international scale, but coming from Alberta, just showing them that we're innovative as well. We've got some great ideas. We were just surprised we even made it to the second round, let alone the finals, let alone winning the competition. So we really had no expectation of that coming into it.
What about you did mention, there's a couple of you touch a whole bunch of subjects we want to talk about with you when you introduced the project, but you did talk about re-traumatization. Can you give us a little bit of of an explanation on what you mean by that, and what does your app help in avoiding a re-traumatization?
Yeah, of course. So last year during the town halls on anti-racism, one of the complaints we heard from activists and members of the community was the effects of re-traumatization, having to relive these horrible traumatic experiences, all the emotions, they swell back, having to detail everything, potentially having to debate, the hardest day of your life to someone who may not genuinely understand any of those issues. So we really want to minimize that re-traumatization effect. Myself, even I spoke at the town hall last year, and even as like a confident public speaker that's a law student, after my speech, I went to the back and I cried a little bit, just because of how heavy some of those topics were. And the way we look at it is, someone that's a trained public speaker, if they're getting re-traumatized with this, the average everyday person, this isn't something easy to relive, and that really decreases the number of individuals that actually want to go and file a complaint because of that level of re-traumatization. It felt at certain points like it was a trauma circus. It was like a theater that we were putting on to try and, convince the city councilors that, there are real issues in the community. So actually one of the steps we did specifically with the app was the wording we used. We used very soft tone language. We made sure there was no accusatory words as well. At every point, every few minutes, we have a bit of a check-in, just to remind them that, for example, filing a complaint can lead to a meaningful resolution, and just different ways to ensure that when we were asking specific questions, even, we were asking them in very specific boxes. So instead of just, tell me your story, which, you can get overcome by all those emotions, we tried to break it up a little bit more into, for example, what happened before the police were called? What happened when they arrived? What happened when they left? And with having these discrete boxes mixed with the language we used, we were really trying to minimize all of that re-traumatization.
Was there a lot of unreported complaints, or is there a lot of unreported complaints? And did your app help in raising awareness to the people in general?
Yeah, so actually when it comes to raising awareness with the app, we've been really lucky with the level of engagement we've received from all stakeholders. So although we created this app originally, with a city councilor's office kind of partnering with us on the app, from there, they introduced us to other city councilors, police commissioners, members of the police service, anti-racism activists, those activists that are, typically on the complete other side of the police as well. So through that engagement, we were really able to figure out what is it that stops a lot of these complaints. And, one thing we heard time after time was, when you click through to file a formal complaint, that big text box that just shows up, it's downright intimidating. A lot of people, especially those where English may not be their first language, it's nearly impossible to be able to get all of the relevant information the first time all written down. And, anywhere in Canada, you'll see we've got a high level of diversity. We've got lots of immigrant populations. We've got English and French speakers. So we really wanted to expand this app. So, for example, my grandma, who, isn't very well versed in English, she could click through a translated version of the app and still have her story heard.
Wow. And is it fairly user-friendly as well? Yeah,
so one of the other big points that we really wanted to ensure was that it was asking plain language questions. So with the plain language questions, especially as law students, we had to go through a bunch of drafts to make sure it was actually plain language for the everyday, because, our version of plain language is still way too complex. But once we got it down to a really great level, that's actually where Councillor Woolley, the councillor we were working with, he said, he's like, a lot of this, could this be translated? Because, his office, when there's, for example, they've got a large Somali population in their constituency. So sometimes when there is a police complaint, they actually have staff that has to sit next to the complainant and physically they have to type it out for them, just because their English comprehension isn't at a level where they could do it responsibly. So with our app, if, they asked, could we potentially be saving staff time by translating these questions over? And it's like, yeah, that's actually really easy what we could do. So then from that's where we stemmed into now our app. And in this final stage now, we're actually translating it into 8 different languages.
Wow.
So the way we came up with those 8 is 2 indigenous languages based on census data, which are the 2 most common. And then the remaining 6 are going to be French, and then the other top from the census data, what would be the most common, such as Arabic and Punjabi, Chinese, for example.
That's great, Dennis. Just to touch base on this issue, I know we spoke about the George Floyd murder, etc. But can you give us like a general overview of what is the relationship with the police in the community, where you are from, and where the project actually started? So, for example, if we touch base on Aboriginals and etc., like the re-traumatization really made me think about all the things that we hear in the news that they've been going through for many, many years. So, could you give us a general overview of what is the dynamics within the community?
Yeah, within the community, there are some very vocal voices about how police mistreat minorities in Calgary. Specifically looking at the stats, a colored individual in Calgary is more than 1.5 times more likely to be checked by a police officer for no apparent reason. We can even see just from the last year's data from using body cams, it's something like strip searches decreased by 50% just by officers having a body cam. Moving forward, Calgary typically ranks one of the highest in the nation for officers that have killed citizens that year. So we're seeing all of these parts as well. We see that carding is another very big prevalent issue here in Alberta. Our current provincial government actually, in theory, has outlawed carding, but then simultaneously allowed street checks, which is, more or less the same thing with a different name. So there's a lot of these issues that we're starting to see. For example, in Calgary, there's a unit called the Gang Suppression Unit, and they've been accused countless times of, being racist in terms of who they choose to card. They'll be walking along, some of the very busy avenues in Calgary that are very pedestrian friendly with all the bars and restaurants. There's even videos on social media of this specific unit targeting specifically colored folks and no one else. So there are a lot of levels to that. But the flip side is we are seeing, with the police force, there is movement for change. They actually historically, both the chiefs of Calgary and Edmonton's police service acknowledged that systemic racism is real in policing, which is just historic for a police chief to say. So we can see that, they have been starting to take steps in the right direction. From the anti-racism hearings, the police budget actually froze. $8 million was allocated from the city of Calgary to alternative 911 and anti-racism initiatives, as well as the Calgary Police Service earmarked another $8 million of their own into looking into other alternatives. A lot of that money has been spent on really good initiatives, such as the DOPE team, which is a team that actually goes around downtowns primarily and helps out the homeless and vulnerable folks that are around there. Mm-hmm. They're not armed. There's nothing aggressive with them. So all of these different initiatives have been taking place, as well. The city of Calgary and the police force actually have both established anti-racism committees. So these committees, we've actually met with all of these committees as well. And, their membership is primarily leaders in the anti-racism community. And we can even see with the police commission, which is the, top level of the police service, they're starting to get more on board with, what are some of these issues. There are some commissioners that are really passionate about these, civil rights issues. So it's really great to see just the level of support we've received, when we presented this app to, countless police officers, higher upper level management and all that. They're all very excited about the app. And, even provincially, with our conservative provincial government, they recently released the Fair Deal for Albertans report. And with the Alberta Deserves a Fair Deal stuff, there was an entire section dedicated to whether Alberta should start its own police force, similar to Ontario, to increase the community policing. Because, the studies show that if they have police officers in the community that police their own community, sometimes that leads to better outcomes that are less violent and in the long term actually benefits the community. So, we're seeing at all the different levels here that this is something they're all considering. And, even our Minister of Justice, who has openly said he does not believe in systemic racism in policing and actually disagrees with the chiefs of police of both Calgary and Edmonton on that issue, even he has said because Alberta lacks a centralized, standardized complaint system for police conduct, this disproportionately harms Alberta's minority communities. So this is a bipartisan issue as we see it here.
Yes, we can really tell that you're very passionate about this, Dennis. So let's say I just had an encounter with a police officer and things went terribly, and I'm wondering, what are my rights? I want to file a formal complaint. How do I go about doing that with the app that you're proposing?
Yeah, so our app, what we're trying to do here is we're not trying to reinvent the wheel or anything like that. We're just simply trying to change the one spot where we're noticing there's a gap. So specifically right now, if you want to file a complaint, what most people will probably do is you Google, Calgary police complaint. And that's probably the easiest way to find it. It'll probably take you to either, the City of Calgary's website or the Police Commission's website or the Police Services website. And then when you get there, it gives you a few options, like if you want to file an informal complaint, if you want to file a formal complaint and all that. So if you actually click the File a Formal Complaint button, that's where, a kind of pop-up will come up. And then that's the page where it's more or less just a blank text box. You guess what may or may not be relevant. What we're trying to do with our app is when you click that File a Formal Complaint button, instead of it redirecting you to, that text box page, it's going to redirect you to our app instead. And then from there, you just kind of click through the app. The first stage of the app, it actually qualifies you to determine if, based on statutory requirements, if you can even file a complaint. So this will actually help, efficiency on the police side of things as well, because then it really cuts out a lot of the issues that, police statutorily can't address. Then from there, then we asked some basic information, what happened before, during, and after they arrived. As well, we added, after specifically talking to the head of complaints for the police commission, one of the things they said was sometimes these complaints, sometimes they just want to be heard. And a lot of the times, even if there wasn't a formal law that was breached, just knowing what it was, where the expectations were breached, what is that? So we even include a text box, like specifically in 1 or 2 sentences, why are you filing this complaint? And then from there, then we've got kind of what we call the magic of the app, which is the plain language questions. And it's more or less, 4 or 5 lists of a few questions. Like, for example, did the officer appear under the influence of alcohol? Did the officer try to intimidate or threaten you? Some of these sorts of, did the officer treat you differently based on, one of the discriminatory grounds? So we kind of go through all of those plain language questions. And then what you do is you actually just check the box for what is true and what isn't. And then once you hit the very end, then the app kind of calculates all of your responses. And then from there, compares it to the statute and case law we've put into the app. And then that's how it's able to then cite, 5.1a may have been breached as well as these other sections. Here's why. And then it generates a letter. And then that letter is actually then sent off to 4 different parties. Just because these 4 parties, according to the Police Act, all have some sort of oversight or disciplinary powers. So it specifically sends it to the police service, the police commission, the chief of police, and the Minister of Justice with just one click, which is really just so efficient. And that way it really increases transparency as well.
So that brings me to think, what if there are no grounds for it to file a complaint? Are users discouraged from doing so?
Yeah, that was actually a great discussion we had early on with the app where, if they went through all the plain language questions and nothing was checked, do we just boot them out of the app, or is there some sort of middle ground? And especially after both our engagement with activists on this, as well as our engagement with police, we still have a button at the end. It'll come up and it'll say, although our app didn't detect any grounds for police misconduct, you can still file this complaint. Click here if you'd still like to file it. Especially for the police, one of the goals for 2021 that Chief Newfield, the chief of police for Calgary, said was he really wanted to bridge the gap and increase conversations between racialized folks in Calgary and the CPS. So, just barring people because our app wasn't able to pick something up, that's going to decrease the discourse between these two parties. And, as stated earlier, we really want to make sure that if there's a breach in expectations, even if it's not a breach in statute, the police still want to know that so they can able to, either communicate with the citizens to kind of explain it a little better, or potentially, change what they're doing in order to fix that issue.
So essentially, there's a legal disclaimer saying, "Oh, this is not legal advice. This is legal information," and so on.
I did touch during the intro about the confidentiality aspect of the of your app. Obviously, it could be confidential, but at one point we need to out ourselves. I don't know how to say this any other way. Can you tell us a little bit more about the this aspect of the app?
Yeah, so I think there's two parts to the confidentiality side of this. The first part is more of the tech side of privacy and protection and security. And then the second side is, when you actually send off this letter, who does it go to and how confidential is it? So with the first part of the app, the great thing with it is it actually uses banking level encryption. So ISO 4200, that's the same level of encryption that NASA, Department of Defense and all of them use. So in terms of encryption, it's about as good as it gets. There is actually no storage server anywhere owned by the police or anything that stores all of these, responses and all that. It's actually just local. And then once you exit out of the program, there's nothing saved. And then all that really is remaining is if you do decide to send off that letter is actually just emailed to 4 different email addresses. So then from there, the confidentiality side of, once the police get this, what's the confidentiality requirements? And it would just fit the current mold they already have. So already, when you file a complaint using the, just a simple text box, it already gets sent over to, their more or less repository where then someone is able to review it. Our app would just be emailing it into that repository itself. But then as well, we do have a section where, at the end, it asks if you want to be anonymous or if you want to provide your information. The issue statutorily that we have right now in Alberta is you actually can't file an official formal complaint without your name attached to it. In terms of, the way we would like it to be, completely anonymous, non-anonymous, it doesn't matter, we can file it. But by filing an anonymous complaint, you are still providing data to the police. Specifically, for example, if the police, over the course of a few years get a dozen complaints anonymously about one officer, that's then a data point that they can then look at. So even though statutorily it requires you to put your name on a formal complaint, our app does still allow those, especially, when you've been traumatized to the point where you have a complete mistrust in the authorities. You still want your voice to be heard. So the nice thing with our anonymous part is even if you don't trust the police enough or the city enough to put your name on the complaint, at least that data will still be there.
But there's still the issue of if you want to file a complaint for one particular event on a particular date at a particular time against a particular agent, I guess it's your anonymity is kind of hard to maintain. It's kind of a moot point in some instances.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the points, especially through our engagement we've been having with police and activists, is just how do we allow these complainants be able to file these complaints in a safe way where, they don't feel like they're outing themselves. And that's also still a really great discussion we are having with the police right now on that. There are other ways where, say, for example, if there's witnesses that file the complaints that corroborate it, for example, that could potentially get you a little bit out of the limelight if that's something you're kind of searching for. But that is definitely some sort of balancing that we're still trying to figure out.
So how was this app received by the authorities, Denis?
Yeah, we were honestly really impressed with just how welcoming and excited the police were when they saw our app. At first, we showed it to a few police commissioners that were also city councilors, and they were just ecstatic about it, hearing about, the plain language questions into a formal complaint, user-friendly, minimizing re-traumatization, especially when we added the ability to translate for full end-to-end user coverage. This was getting them really excited. And then when we added to the fact...
until they figured out what it was for, or or still today?
No, still to this day, we've had, I want to say, just so many meetings with different department heads, their head of complaints, their head of IT, their strategic planning, their outreach, their head of neighborhoods, for example, their anti-racism leads. And they've all been very receptive of this. A lot of the people in the forces themselves actually speak English as a second language. So a lot of them do understand the hurdles. We had a big meeting with a lot of deputy chiefs and a lot of different heads of the police force. And, one of the things they said was, they recognize that for someone who's ESL, the current system may be daunting and that may be preventing complaints. So, because of that, they see as well that there is a gap and they are interested in looking at better ways to do police complaints. And actually, all of Alberta now is looking at different ways of improving this police complaint process. So, having a bunch of law students, win some international competition, do a lot of the grunt work on the front end of the app, able to more or less present this to them, tell them it's completely free. Our app is completely open source. There's no licensing fees. We're just doing this for the betterment of our neighborhood and our communities. They're excited about that.
I'm just gonna, for the benefit of our listener, ESL is English as a second language. I'm a gamer, so a lot of gamers are gonna have ESL because it's a platform for online gaming as well. But ESL is English as a second language. You've been very humble because you're telling us that it was well received, but you're not telling us that you did when you got grants, you got seed money and all that stuff. Can you tell us a little bit more about this?
Yeah, so pretty much after we went to that international Iron Tech lawyer competition, winning first place at that event, it's tech leaders and legal leaders of the world. We started getting some good attention on the app. Since then, the Edmonton Police Service and the University of Alberta, they have a joint seed grant of $10,000 that went to a board member of the Alberta Machine Intelligence Institute. And she's actually studying our app now specifically for privacy, security, fairness, and the utility of aggregate data collection. So they're excited to see kind of more on the back end a white paper of what this could do for the city of Edmonton. And then over in Calgary, after we got such a great reception from all the different stakeholders, the councillor we were working on and, one of the city administrators co-sponsored our application for $45,000 to just complete the app to, from the student project level, just to a final clean version that, we can literally copy and paste the code from here and just paste it right into the City of Calgary webpage, and it's nice and easy and good to go. So we're really excited. It's not very often that you see the City of Calgary unanimously vote in favor of something. Their council, they've all got great opinions. A lot of the times they're not the same, though. So seeing our app be unanimously supported, both in the Priorities and Finance Committee and then by full City Council, has been really exciting. Our goal is kind of 6 to 8 months from now being finished with the app. But, this is pretty recent, so we're just getting the ball rolling now on, kind of getting to that final stage. As well as, we've now spoken to different law societies about our app, how guided interviews specifically. So our app, asking these plain questions and then putting together a PDF at the end. This is just a guided interview, which is, we're seeing more and more legal tools being automated this way. We're the first first in the world to do it for police complaints.
Correct.
But there are a lot of other applications for it. For example,
Correct.
we've had one law society ask, can we adopt this for lawyer complaints? We've had, even the city of Calgary, their eyes are kind of opening up to this. They're asking, if we're done with this, what about, making an anti-bullying app? Could we do that? Could it cite, the criminal code? What about the student code of conduct? So all of these opportunities are opening up, as well as, we've talked to people in Asia about what we've done with our app because they're interested over there in reforming their police complaints, as well as the American Civil Liberties Union down in the southern United States. We've had long meetings with them just about what we're doing right and kind of how they can incorporate some of our wins into their police reform as well. And, speaking to a lot of these different parties, that's when you realize actually just how lucky we are here in Calgary to be so received well by all of the different stakeholders. Because, for example, the ACLU with their app, it's going to be a completely ACLU app. There is no integration with the police force on it. So again, we're just lucky, I think, to be able to have a supportive force that, is able to be introspective at times and at least be open to hearing what the community is trying to do.
Do you think the app would have been received so well if not for George Floyd and everything that happened, the public outcry for that situation?
That's a great question. And it's tough to say, especially we saw that a lot of Canadians had no idea about a lot of these anti-racism issues, a lot of the issues we see BLM bringing up, different anti-racism activists. And, sometimes, the nation does need a little bit of a reckoning to hear, like, this is what's happening on the other side, especially when, so many folks, and myself included, know that there are good members of the police force too. So, when there is this cognitive dissonance of, I've always been treated well by the police, why are, certain folks saying they've never been treated well by the police? Sometimes you do need that large community support in order for them to really consider it as truthful. Just an unfortunate reality of, dealing with civil rights or anti-racism issues we've seen throughout history. And, it's really unfortunate what happened with George Floyd. And, with our app, we're just really hoping that with his legacy, we can just be a small part of, you can't have justice when someone's murdered, but you can have future accountability.
Well, yeah, well said. Let's geek out a little bit. The technical side of the app. What's the backbone of it?
Yeah, so the great thing about our class we took, we were using a program called DocAssemble. So DocAssemble, it's got a great story. It was created by a Virginia family lawyer. And what he wanted to do was actually increase automation at his own, firm so he could increase access to justice for everyone that needed family law services. And, throughout doing that, he realized that this is something a lot of lawyers, they could use. I just got to make it not very complicated because a lot of us law types are not very tech savvy. So it had to be easy enough that, anyone could pick up on it. And, with the great thing with DocAssemble, what this lawyer did, it's completely open source, completely free. Anyone can, you can look up DocAssemble, you can download it onto your websites. It's super easy to do. And then he's almost got a Wikipedia as well, where he actually lists out, you want to put in a date box, copy and paste this code. You want to ask a question, copy and paste this code. So he made it really easy to use. And as well, it's actually based off of a programming language called Python. So Python, the way I describe it is, it's a very computer science 101 kind of language that, most tech people, when they're trained in that area, will know or know of. So then it going from, for example, lawyers coding something up to then we're passing it off to an IT team. That transition is really easy because it's all based on Python. And, our team, there's 4 of us. None of us come from a computer science background. My background is in journalism communications. We've got business students. We've got a PhD in 18th century medicine. So not very, tech trained. And even throughout that, we were able to use DocAssemble in such a genuine and real way that we were able to make this award-winning app. And, when we're talking about, there's a lot of guided interview apps and all that are, similar to DocAssemble. but some of these apps cost thousands of dollars a year to license. So the great thing with DocAssemble is he's created just such a great platform, made it free for everyone. And, the lawyers that use it, for example, there's actually a great Slack channel. Whenever we had questions about something, when Slack, it's a platform almost similar to like Teams, where you kind of have boards and you're messaging each other on there. So whenever we'd have an issue or, how do we do this? We would even just message the Slack channel, and we'd have, random lawyers from all over the world that are passionate about DocAssemble, literally within a day, message us back like, have you tried this code? Have you tried that? Like, hey, I can review that for you if you want. So even the community, they are so friendly and welcoming. So for anyone that's wanting to pick it up, it's just really easy to just reach out to someone and you get back fast.
Oh, great. I agree with you. And thank you for making me discover DocAssemble. I will reach out to them. Maybe we'll make it an episode on our podcast at one point. That was the coding part of it. Nobody came from a computer science background. Did you need help other than the Slack channel for helping you develop the app?
No, genuinely, we were able to just map out the app using, simple variables. If this is yes, then, this section of the statute may have been breached. If you don't check this box, you don't statutorily qualify. So throughout the first half of the semester, we learned all of the basic tools needed to put the app together. And it's just a testament to how easy it is once you really understand. You just got to break it down into simple yes, no questions. And then from there, it just really codes it out really easily. So in terms of, external help beyond the Slack channel, no, it was just the four of us putting it together. Otherwise, we actually wouldn't be able to submit it if it was any external folks helping us.
Did you not need any data, Denis, to be able to see like what was done previously?
Yeah, so the great thing with the research we actually did before the app started, that's actually a great question, is I was actually lucky enough where, under our provincial government with their Fair Deal panel, they were doing a lot of research on different issues. Our vice dean of our law school at the time was actually appointed onto the panel and hired a bunch of students to be able to help out with a lot of the legal research. And, I am passionate about, these policing issues and these community-minded issues. So I was lucky enough to be one of the researchers that worked on the Fair Deal panel report. And, through that, I was able to get just a lot of research on specifically policing in Alberta, getting all the statistics, comparing it to other police forces, thinking about other models of doing it, hearing kind of the primary complaints through the research. So then that was more, on the political right side of the spectrum. And then it was actually interesting because then a little bit short time after that, I was actually working as a political consultant for some of the city councillors here that lean a bit more on the progressive side. And for them, I was also doing a lot of police research, but specifically more so for the Calgary police. So it was actually great because then we've got all of this great research and, we've got research done both for the right and the left. Mm-hmm. So it's just great having just this knowledge set then that we were able to then apply to this app. And then specifically knowing, from all of this research, what is it, the Alberta police regulations under section 5.1, it lists out exactly what is misconduct. And then based on, if one of these are true, then only is there disciplinary action. So we combined that with all the case law we had from all the prior research. And that's how we were able to develop kind of the questions and the variables we were using.
Nice.
So this app will be available in how many different languages?
Yeah, so our goal is to have it in 8 different languages. Specifically, 2 of the languages will be Indigenous languages. I believe Blackfoot and Cree, but I will have to double check.
That's awesome.
And then the other 4 will be, the other 6 will be French, Arabic, Punjabi, Chinese, I believe, Filipino as well. But those languages are just purely based off of census data, because we really wanted to ensure that we just got the biggest population sets first. And from there, we've already seen, presenting this app to, one anti-racism committee, and then, 8 of them will connect us to 8 more people each. And, they'll connect us to another 8 more people each. So we've already reached out to many different community associations and different ethnic groups that are ready to actually volunteer volunteer their time translating this. And luckily, with the city of Calgary giving us the funding to create this final stage of the app, nice thing with this translation is we're not actually going to be, taking advantage of any free labor. We're going to be able to pay, members of these marginalized communities so they can actually contribute to the app as well, which is just really special.
It is actually very special. So we are with Denis Ram, project manager, who just graduated from University of Alberta. The app that we're talking about is called Clear Justice, but you didn't do this alone, Denis. You were with 3 other colleagues. Can you tell us or introduce us?
Yeah, of course. So we made this in a class project. So there was myself. I was the only third-year law student in the group. And then we had Karyna Omelchenko, Prabhjot Punnia, and Darren Wagner. And the way we actually divvied up the project was we decided, all 4 of us have the same level of understanding with the coding. And, we're all kind of similar when it comes to legal research and all that. So how do we kind of divvy this up? So what we actually did was myself and Darren, we handled more of the front end of things. So we actually, mapped it out. We came up with a little bit of that extra research. We put together the questions. We put together the presentations. We did a lot of the advocacy work. And then the back end, we actually had an all-female coding team of Karyna and Prabhjot. And the great thing with that was they were able to just blast it out. And, one of those sayings, you don't want to have too many cooks in the kitchen. So we really wanted to, let them just completely, they know it better than me and Darren at this point in terms of just exactly how to do the coding for it. And it worked out really well because then through that back and forth, when we were, for example, designing the front end and then we'd present it to Prabhjot and Karyna, they were able to give us great feedback and vice versa because, we were almost acting like a third party at that point for each other just to kind of bounce ideas off of one another. And, it's been great to see because, between myself, Karyna, Prabhjot, and Darren, all of us as well speak more languages than just English. We've got French, we've got Punjabi, we've got Fiji Hindi, and we've got Ukrainian. So, between the 4 of us, and Latin as well. So, between the 4 of us, we really understood the value of that, as well as, 3 of the 4 of us are either a visible minority or an immigrant. So we also understood the relationship that police have with some of these more vulnerable and marginalized communities. Mm-hmm. And, once we kind of thought of this idea, our goal was kind of just to see if, by the end of this school project, if we can kind of talk to some officers about this, just to see where it would go. And just the level of support and engagement and excitement we got was just something we were not expecting. Like, for example, we were doing a talk at one of the City of Calgary's anti-racism committees. And one of the questions came from a spectator that was just watching the meeting. And it was the chief technology officer for the Calgary Police Service. Just because they were already so interested, they wanted to chat with us more about the tech side. So, that was all stuff we just weren't expecting. So, it was a great way, I think, to spend this year. And the collaboration was really great because, because of COVID, the 4 of us actually haven't met in person as a group ever. So that's also been very interesting. We actually got a little bit of a photo shoot done when we had some of these magazine articles coming out, and it was the first time some of us actually met in person. And it was strange because we knew each other so well at that point. And it's like, oh, I didn't realize you're 6'4". Whoa, holy. So it was definitely interesting and a very COVID experience to have virtual friends.
So your picture in Canadian Lawyer Mag is photoshopped.
Yeah, we are not standing together. It's definitely COVID-safe photo shoot.
Well, this is great, Denis, and I'm glad for you to tell us that as one does, one of your colleagues speaks Latin, as one does, which is something fairly rare. Yeah. Well, we are with Denis Ram, project manager for Clear Justice. We're also joined by Sarah Gabad, who is a research assistant here at Question de Preuve. We will take a short break where, if you want to entertain us after the break, Denis, about the scalability of the app and maybe the future of apps that are like this or that looks like this, and where do you see technology in law in the next years or in the coming years? So that's it. So let's take a short break. Vous aurez remarqué, chers auditeurs, que ça fait un petit bout de temps que nous n'avons pas diffusé d'épisodes de questions de preuve. Eh bien, c'est parce que je travaille très fort avec une équipe afin de diffuser sous peu un nouveau projet en partenariat avec le gouvernement du Québec. Je veux vous parler du lancement prochain du nouveau balado Victima, destiné aux personnes victimes d'actes criminels et à leurs proches, afin de les sensibiliser aux programmes et ressources existantes, de faciliter l'accès à la justice et de partager l'information disponible. Animé et réalisé par moi, Hugo Martin, le balado Victima sert de guide général présentant certaines des ressources qui sont disponibles et les informations pertinentes aux différentes situations de victimisation. Les personnes victimes ne sont pas seules dans leur expérience, dans leur démarche et dans leur cheminement. C'est ce qu'on veut partager à travers le balado Victima. On a plein d'intervenants provenant de différents domaines et d'organismes, dont SOS Violence conjugale, le Service intégré en abus et maltraitance, le SIAM à Québec, le Service de police de Terrebonne, Arsenault Dufresne-Oui Avocat avec Virginie Dufresne-Lemire, la survivante Émilie Bourdage, l'Association des familles de personnes assassinées ou disparues, le Centre de services de justice réparatrice, le Centre international de criminologie comparée, le CICC, le directeur des poursuites criminelles et pénales, le DPCP, qui a accepté de participer au projet du balado Victima, et évidemment les centres d'aide aux victimes d'actes criminels, les CAVAC. C'est extrêmement important, ils sont un partenaire essentiel dans l'aide aux personnes victimes d'actes criminels. Visitez le site web victima.ca pour plus d'informations. Le balado sort bientôt. Restez à l'affût de Victima sur votre plateforme d'écoute préférée, telle que Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts et Spotify. Et comme je disais, sur victima.ca. Vous pouvez aussi suivre Victima sur les réseaux sociaux. Merci de partager le balado Victima en collaboration avec le gouvernement du Québec pour le droit d'être informé, d'être protégé, de porter plainte, d'accéder à la justice, d'être dédommagé, et surtout pour le droit de se reconstruire. All right. Thank you, Denis. Thank you, Sarah. Sarah, what do you think? Anything that we missed for the first section? Or?
No, we did speak about the scalability of the app. You mentioned it could be used for cyberbullying, I believe. Could you expand on that, Denis?
Yeah, so actually, I think there's two kind of sides of the scalability. The first side is specifically for the police complaints. The nice thing with the way the Alberta Police Act works is, all of this precedent we've been using for the app, the statute, it's all the same province-wide. So with that, really all we have to do is go into the code, change, 2 or 3 email addresses for where this letter is being sent, and our app could be implemented province-wide, which is just very exciting to see. It's a very easy adjustment. For example, if the Lethbridge Police Service, it's a noticeably smaller city than Calgary. So, they don't have the same amount of resources to just, give a bunch of law students $45,000 to finish building an app. The great thing is, the way Calgary is so motivated to just exporting our progressiveness in a sense is, if they approach us saying, hey, could you do this for Lethbridge? It's like, yeah, I could do it in about 2 minutes. I just got to go in and change a few email addresses. So scalability province-wide is super simple and very easy. And, with some minor changes really with regard to, which statute we're referencing and a little bit of different case law, but very similar. Our app could be done coast to coast. And we're even seeing now, after engaging with different stakeholders, we've already seen different chiefs of police for police forces that are in more than one province, potentially coast to coast, have already been reaching out to us saying, hey, when you guys are done finishing this app, do you mind giving us a presentation? Because is this something that we could implement? And if not, how could we do something similar? And our mantra with our app is, it's completely open source, completely free. There is no profit motive with what we're doing here. So, if any police force wants to, for example, pull some of our plain language questions, there's no issues with that. If it's the qualifiers, anywhere from 1 to 100%, they're more than welcome to take it. And as well, we can see that, scalability, because this is the first guided interview specifically for police complaints, it's getting a lot of attention. We've seen, people in the States have been reaching out to us as well, people in Asia. And, in terms of scalability, we can start seeing more of these being implemented. specifically for police complaints moving forward. And I do think that's the trend we're going to see. Here in Canada, we've actually seen guided interviews being used for other forms already. We see the federal government for a lot of immigration forms. They already use guided interviews, just embedded on their website. You click through a few boxes and it's able to fill out the form for you. As well as in British Columbia, we're seeing more and more of these forms, especially for self-rep. You just fill out this form real quick online. It's just a guided interview, so you're not, guessing what I have to put in what box. So the trend is moving in that direction. And as we see too, the more lawyers that are exposed to what a guided interview is, seeing just how easy it is to code this up. A lot of what a guided interview does, asking questions and then citing statute in a letter, that's what a lot of what a lawyer does. So to be able to automate that in a meaningful way is the trend that we're going to see moving forward.
Are you using the open source license from Open Source Initiative, or
At this time, we haven't officially signed on with any initiatives for the open source,
Okay.
But we have definitely been looking into that. Our kind of main goal here first is just to convince the city of Calgary that this app is up and running and it's working great. And then from there, we're going to fully start exporting it. But that is definitely more of a stage 2.
Okay. Tell me now, what can we expect to see in the future? Or are there any other? You did tell us a little bit about the bullying aspect, or there's a whole bunch of other application that could be used with your app. But where do you see it in, I don't know, 3, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Especially when we're talking about technology, even talking about this app, 3 years ago would have been nearly impossible. So this right now, just at the, beginning of guided interviews and legal automation. So in terms of police complaints, I can see, coast to coast, North America wide, and potentially further. We're even seeing places like Australia and New Zealand already looking at how they can improve their own police complaint process. And I think we are going to see this trend of more and more plain language questions and a lot less of, just a big text box. Tell me what's wrong. What we're also going to see more moving forward, I think, is going to be 2 things. The first one is better user interfaces. Right now, I think we're finally getting to a point in tech where user interfaces are becoming just so much more important. It's becoming front and center when people are designing apps. It's no longer a byproduct idea. Long gone are the days where you open an app and there's 25 different buttons to pick from. It's a lot more of swipes and gestures and really guides you through a lot of these issues. The second side of where I see these guided interviews going, and specifically 5 or 10 years, is a lot more ease of use for the lawyer's coding. We saw it, with video games, for example, where they were a lot more complex. You've got to kind of type in your answers and it's a pick your adventure. And now, you can move your arms around and you're able to play video games. And I think we're going to see that same level of ease of use, maybe not to the point of moving your arms around and you're done with an app, but definitely to the point where, someone who's got no experience with coding anything, doesn't have to take a class for half a semester to learn how to use the app. Maybe even just a portal on a desktop. They're able to, drag some boxes around and all of a sudden they've got all the questions and answers they need. That's where we're going to see it moving forward. We're starting to see that already. The issue is because there's only a few companies that are doing that on a really large scale. The prices for licensing this technology out still hasn't dropped, in my opinion, to a very reasonable level. That's one of the issues, especially at Iron Tech Lawyer competition. There was everyone's making just these great innovative apps, but they're not being implemented specifically because of cost. So once we see that reduction of cost, I think that's when we're really going to see an explosion.
Would you have done it if it wouldn't have been for the class?
Yeah, that's what I was gonna ask. How do you see being trained in somewhat of a tech capacity as part of your legal education? Do you think all law students should go through that?
Yeah, we definitely as a team understand kind of our privileged position now in the legal community, specifically here in Alberta. There's maybe a handful of us legally trained folks that know how to code something like this. So part of that responsibility that we've taken on is the advocacy side of it. We understand that, not everyone knows just how amazing, guided interviews are. No one really understands just how easy it is to create an app like this. No one really understands how efficient it is. For example, someone has a complaint about a workplace injury, just to be able to check off some boxes and not have to speak to a lawyer, and then the lawyer simply reviews the letter at the end. These are all things through advocacy. We're just trying to get the word out, because the more people that know about it, the easier it's going to become. And, especially from our point of privilege, we understand, the city of Calgary is already bouncing ideas off of us for future app ideas. Different law societies are bouncing ideas off of us for future app ideas. And that's only going to continue to grow. We're seeing millennials and now Gen Zers. They're just getting so much more natural with computers. They've never known a time without the internet. So that's going to translate into more innovation. And, we're really going to see the curve pick up, I think.
I think you're right about this. And we're more and more lawyers are becoming more tech savvy, even if it's not necessarily in the coding part, but coding tools are getting easier. You see what I did there, Sarah? I did my own segue for our next segment of the Practitioner's Tool. Every episode, Denis, I'm asking my guest, what is something that you cannot live without? I've seen it in the synopsis, in the script of today's episode, and I think it's a great choice. And you did touch your tool a little bit throughout the episode, but I'd like you to maybe dig a little deeper and tell us what law students and lawyers can do with the tool that you want to talk to us about today.
Yeah, specifically, I think the tool that we would say is the number one tool, especially considering guided interviews, is DocAssemble. There's just something so innovative about DocAssemble. The passion that the lawyer that created it really has for access to justice and increasing it. It's evident. He always puts out new patches and new updates. Our professor for the class, he actually emailed him once asking him a question, and he replied back saying, tomorrow there'll be an update, so we can do that.
Your professor is, Jason Morris, is that
That's correct, yeah. He's actually, very intelligent in terms of the legal tech side of things. So it's great to hear that, if you actually message the founder of DocAssemble, a lot of the times he gets back to you. He's very integrated in the community. He's really passionate about it too. He's not in it for the profit motive. And I have no idea how he manages a full-time practice and is able to do this DocAssemble on the side as a hobby. But he's able to pull it off. And, in terms of installing DocAssemble, like I said earlier, it's completely open source and free. So there isn't any subscription costs. The only real cost for it is the cost of making a website. So as long as you have a website up and running, you pay for some hosting, then you just copy and paste all this code. He's got a great guide online on exactly how to do it. Myself, I'm not a computer science guy, and I was able to just follow those instructions and actually put it on ours. So it's super straightforward. And then from there, the other really nice thing with DocAssemble is, as security evolves and all of that, he'll continue to push those updates out at zero cost, which is just amazing. And, especially when we're talking about training young lawyers, there's only so much training that's going to happen if it costs the school $1,000 a student for the app, versus this one as especially a training tool, just for people to understand what the extent of guided interviews could be, to have this free and open source program. It's got a great setting where it's kind of called a playground. You can type in code and you can just trial it out right there, really nice and easily. When it tells you there's an error, you can actually look up what the error is in their equivalent documentation. Cool. So it's all very user friendly in terms of that end of things. In terms of actually coding the app, the community as well behind DocAssemble. I've never seen a community like this where, all these lawyers are so passionate. You ask a question and you'll get 5 different responses on how to do it. And you'll actually see, some of the first responses will comment on the third response saying, oh, actually ignore me. This way is way better. So just that community, it's a fun community. Everyone's really excited. And, whatever app they're talking about in for example, the Slack channel or or online, other forums. Everyone is always just supporting everyone, and I think it's just a really fun community to be a part of.
That's great. I love geeking out like this, and this is I'm doing my another segue to my tool. So for this episode, my tool, as our listeners know, I can't come up with a tool that I use in my professional life all the time. But what I decided to do, and I wanted to do to make some kind of a link with Denis's tool and what he talked to us today. And Harvard University has online classes. They also have a computer science class, an introduction to computer science class, and they have CS50 for lawyers. So they do have online Harvard University CS50 for lawyers, where it's a free, obviously, online class made for lawyers and law students. The course emphasizes on high-level concepts aiming to help students better understand the legal implications of their clients' technological decisions. And what you will learn in that introduction to computer science from Harvard University are the challenges at the intersection of law and technology. There's computational thinking, programming languages, algorithm. We hear about algorithm all the time, but what are they? Data structures, cryptography, and cybersecurity. So this is a great course. I saw the outline of the course. I will be taking it. They're looking at about 3 to 6 hours per week, but that's the time commitment. If you want to get a verified certificate, it's $200 US, but it could be worth it. The other thing I want to talk about is Code Academy. It's the greatest place to learn general purpose coding skills. I did Code Academy with my 15-year-old son, and I learned Python through Code Academy. It's free, but not always free. There's a lot of introduction classes that are free, but if you want a pro version, and it doesn't mean the pro version that to be a professional coder, it's just like some beginners class require the pro account, and it is a monthly subscription. You don't have to commit, and you learn all aspects of computer science, including the programming language Python that Denis talked to us about a little earlier. I think that being knowledgeable in coding skills and programming languages can help a lot of lawyers in their practice. Most of our clients have a website, an app, a contract with a specialized software that they use in their business, and knowing a little bit about the background and how it's coded and how it's implemented, how it is used by your clients I think it's an important part of it. And knowing a little bit about this is great. If not, well, you know a new skill. It's never bad to learn a new skill. Have you ever touched any of those classes, Denis, online, either with Code Academy or something equivalent?
Yeah, no, I haven't taken any online coding classes, but I do highly recommend as well any of those online courses that some of these major universities offer. It's always just such a great way to increase your skill set. I have a graduate certificate from Harvard Business School after taking their core curriculum, and it was all online as well, pre-COVID, actually. Funny enough, now everything is online. But some of these online courses, they just really help fill in, some of these gaps, especially, lawyers are sometimes expected to know so much more than just the law that, as you said, it just really helps, not necessarily being fluent, but just knowing what you don't know.
Correct, I agree.
Yeah, and actually tech competency is part of our professional code of conduct, I believe, since it's been a couple of years now. And I know in Quebec as well, but for sure, I know that it's in the Code of Ethics in the province of Quebec, but I believe it's also in the Model Code. Yeah, to be tech competent is part of our professional responsibility.
Good point, Sarah. Denis, what's to come? Any more talks, more development for the app? Is that what you're going to be doing for the next couple of years?
Yeah, that's a great question. Right now, because this app has, really gained so much momentum, our timeline for completing the app with the funding we received from the city is about 6 to 8 months. So by then, we'll be representing it back to full city council. We're continually engaging with all the stakeholders we can on this. It's very rare that you see police, counselors, commissioners, activists, academics, tech experts students, members of the public, all coming together for a wonderful, wonderful project. So we really want to make sure we're, doing them all right, because it's not very often you're able to get all of these people agreeing on anything. So our next year is really going to be focused on making this the best app we can for Calgary. And then from there, the stage 2 is, of course, for the rest of Alberta, and then coast to coast Canada wide. That's really where we're going with this. And we just know, with this app, especially being the first guided interview app for police complaints, this has the potential of improving access to justice for millions globally. And we just really want to do it. It's honor.
Great. Thank you very much, Denis Ram, Project Manager for Clear Justice app. I invite you to do some searches on the net regarding this app. We can, if anybody's interested to learn a little bit more, you can reach Denis via LinkedIn. Is that a good idea, Denis?
Yeah, that's the greatest way to find me, either LinkedIn or Twitter.
Great. What's your handle on Twitter?
Yeah, my handle on Twitter is _Denis Ram, DenisRam.
Great. Thank you again. Thank you so much, Denis. Thank you to your colleagues as well. And I don't know if you have any parting words, but it's your time to shine. You can promote and plug yourself.
Yeah, no, thank you again for having us. Like I said, we understand our privileged position being trained with this automation tools. And, if anything, I hope throughout this process, understanding the value of these guided interviews, whether it's to increase, your own practice or to draw people onto your website, fill out this form, or just supporting other initiatives in the community to really increase meaningful complaints for the police service in your area. I think it's been great chatting with you guys. It's been great being able to promote our app. And, if anyone is listening and they would love to hear more about our app and potentially how we could adopt this app for their police force, don't hesitate to reach out. We're always more than happy to chat.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Denis. It's been great.
No, thank you. This has been wonderful.
Super. Dear colleagues, you know what I'm about to say, but in English this time. I don't do it very often. Subscribe. Simply search for Question de Preuve on any podcast site, Podcatcher, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, everywhere you can listen to a podcast. You're not so podcast savvy? Then go to the Question de Preuve section of the rivercastmedia.com site and listen to us from there. All of our episodes are there to listen for free. You need continuing education hours? Go to the site and register there to complete your hours. We are approved by the Quebec Bar, the Chambre des Notaires, and because of this, any legal profession across Canada can have our podcast accredited. If you would like to participate in an upcoming episode to discuss what is trending in the legal world in your field of expertise, we can be reached at info@rivercastmedia.com, or you can just send me a DM on Twitter at @HRMartin. Stay up to date on our podcast as more and more episodes are coming and great guests will be welcome. Thank you, dear listeners. Thank you, Sarah Gabad, the newest member of the Question de Preuve team. She's our researcher, and thank you for our essential work on the preparation of this episode. Thank you to my late friend René Gagnon for the music. Thank you, Sergio Travaglione, for the audio and recording equipment. And last but not least, thank you, Constance, for managing the Rivercast Media Podcast Network. She's off today, figuring that one day off in the last 60 days might be a good idea. The best way to stay up to date, again, is to subscribe to our podcast. Not only it's great to stay up to date, but it's great for our numbers. Our listeners know in French that we were top 20 in Canada a couple of weeks ago. We would like to raise our listenership in the rest of Canada in English as well as in the United States. So there's a lot of surprises coming. Thank you very much for listening. This podcast is a Rivercast Media SA production. And to conclude, as always, remember, everything is a question of evidence.